Welcome. I am Izzy Gentry, and I want to thank you so much for doing the research and diving into tough subjects with me. If you are new to our platform, then I want to just kind of explain that we take a biblical approach to crisis management. We talk about really difficult subjects that you may run into as a volunteer or a leader, and we address some of those things that may be tough subjects to know how to approach. So let's take a look at our first one here today, which is self-harm. We are going to talk about some of the signs or symptoms that you may see if you feel or are maybe picking up on some signals that someone could be struggling and you're not quite sure how to approach that. The first thing I want to make very, 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 very clear is the worst thing that you can do in a situation like this is immediately approach another volunteer or leader and say, I think this is going on, and it becomes this spread of information that could be something completely not the case, or there may be something else medically going on with the person. And so we want to be really sensitive to that information and making sure that we do things biblically, which is to approach the person first and foremost and to get the correct information, then to process through what we should do with the information we receive from the individual. So let's take a look at some of those things that you may run up against or maybe seeing. One of the things is covering your wrists, arms, legs with long, let's just say, and I want to be clear that long sleeve shirts do not mean somebody is doing something. It would be like, it's a really hot day and this person's wearing a turtleneck up to here and keeps pulling at their sleeves and is making it abundantly clear they don't want you to see their wrists. Maybe refuse shaking hands, keeping their hands underneath their armpits, just wearing bulky jewelry. They could be wearing a bulky watch, something that is noticeably out of place, or that they're being very intentional and that stays in place, kind of pulling at those wrists and whatnot to kind of make sure that things stay hidden. So we want to look for that. Carrying medication, maybe you look over and notice that someone has something in their purse that isn't prescribed to them, a medication or something that is clearly not something that that person may even need. Maybe they get a high off of it, or maybe they intend to self-harm with it and over-medicate. Maybe they're, doing things to make them feel less or more. And so we want to take those into consideration. Other ways of self-harm can be bulimia or anorexia, things to that regard. Something that you noticeably see if someone is binging is when they come out of the bathroom, they have bloodshot eyes, they have swollen facial expressions, so their cheeks and whatnot. Now, I want to be very, very clear. There are other medical issues that can also come across as the same way, including lupus or some other medical things that can cause the face to seem swollen or pale. So again, it's really important that we get the right information from the individual and not assume anything worse. I want to take a look at how we approach gaining that person's trust and how we can start to even open up the topic of conversation. Let's just say we have some physical evidence that makes us very concerned, that is warranted for us to have a conversation. But where do we go from there? How do we even begin this? And the first thing I want to say is when you approach someone to have some of these difficult conversations, you need to listen more than you speak. It's so incredibly vital that we give people a place and an opportunity to have that eye contact, that full attention, and that we are intentionally listening to what the person is saying, that we're not processing in our head like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Like, what verse should I be pulling up right now? Like, you're planning in your head and you're not actually listening to what the person is saying, and you're not fully taking in the information that could be really vital in actually the progression of their healing, because they can give you some really key details that can be helpful for you in guiding them through this process. But if you're not listening, you're probably going to miss those cues. So it's really important to be a good listener. No one's expecting you to know exactly what to say just when you hear it. If someone says, yes, I've been cutting for 2 years, or whatever it may be, or I have an issue with body dysphoria and it's something that I've been dealing with for quite some time, you tend to feel like I should know what to say. I don't know what to say. I'm not qualified for this. And so you kind of like check out, or your immediate response is, I need to go find someone else who is more qualified. This person has gotten to the point of telling you this. That means for whatever reason, they feel that you are a trusted individual and they feel that they can trust you with this information. You're the person they want to talk to. They do not want you to then pawn them off to someone else who's going to give them, a lecture and speak at them because they don't know them. They want to be able to build in this conversation with you. You've gotten this far. Give yourself credit for getting this far. And just, again, go back to that active listening. One of the things that you need to kind of take into consideration when having the conversation, when it is your turn to talk, is to not ask questions that are almost glorifying the experience. And so we don't say things like, how do you self-harm? Or where do you self-harm? Or what do you use to self-harm? Or where do you get these pills? Like, what you don't ask really specific questions because you're almost like embodying a glorification of the experience. You want to ask all of those antecedent questions that are really specific as to how did we get here? So, tell me about the experiences that happened in your life prior to you starting to self-harm. And you can kind of get some experiences. Did mom and dad go through a divorce? Did something physically happen to them? Did they just start to feel overwhelming depression and anxiety and not know how to deal with it? Like maybe they don't know they're depressed. Maybe they don't know they are dealing with anxiety. They just know they don't feel themselves. That can be really an opportunity for us to figure out what is the next step for this person based off of their own personal experiences. And that can kind of lead you into okay, maybe we need to get counseling for, let's just say, for example, if they went through something that, was a physical abuse situation, they need to go through the proper steps of finding resolution with themselves and learning to find other ways to cope and heal through that process that don't involve them harming themselves. The third and really a key point to how we address these situations is that we ask them, who in your life do you trust? Now, I am fully aware that there is a huge possibility that they're going to say no one. Okay, but let's just say, for example, they say, oh, my Aunt Sally, I really, really, really trust her. I really feel like I can talk to her, but I haven't told her what's going on. And they may even be ashamed to tell the person that they trust what's going on. But you want to make that connection, because if it comes to the point where you do feel like it needs to get to the point where you need to report it to someone, you want to be able to ask, would you feel safe if we brought in Aunt Sally to have this conversation and let them know what's going on? And so we can, make the proper decisions that we need to make. That is a huge one. You listened. 2, you are building up a plan that makes them feel safe. They don't feel like they're being ratted out. They don't feel like they're being talked at. And you give them an opportunity to make a first step. And it's something that we need to really be focused on making that connection happen. If they say, no, I really don't want to, then we really need to start the process of, okay, we need to express why it's important to involve Sally, because what I don't want to do is have to involve mom and dad, because I don't want you to feel like I'm violating your trust. And so I want to include someone that you trust, but we really do need to do something, because it's important to me that you begin to heal and you begin to not want to continue to harm yourself. And so we kind of give them the alternative. We don't immediately go to the alternative. Oh, well, she didn't want me to involve Sally, so we called mom and dad. No, we want to make sure she knows what the consequence is, or he knows what the consequence is. I'm going to have to tell someone else if we don't tell someone you trust. So I would much rather do this your way and allow you to lead the process But if you don't, I have to be clear what I have to do. And so we allow space for self-reflection. We allow them to want to talk through how they got there, how they're feeling, how they are, in that state of mind. Like, what do you feel right before you decide to do the act? Do you feel hypervigilant? Do you feel like, does your heart start racing? Do you feel out of breath? Like, what are some of the signs that this is coming on? Like, okay, I feel like I'm like having a panic attack and I'm going to go and take these pills, or I'm going to go do something. Then like, that's the moment we want to teach them those behaviors that they have. That's your mind. That's your body saying, I need some assurance. And so we want to give them an alternative to responding to those behaviors that are naturally happening within their body, and saying, maybe that's when we call Aunt Sally and say, hey, I'm struggling right now. Or that's when we start journaling. That's when we start, we put our music on, or we start, whatever it is that they find peace in, whatever they find to be helpful for them. That's what we want to encourage them to. But we can't do that when we're talking at people. We can only do that when we are listening to what they enjoy, what brings them peace, what brings them a space of being able to bring themselves back down. So again, really comes from that active listening. Listen, anything that involves crisis management involves an incredible commitment to time. You have to be able to be willing to give it time to go through the process. Because if you think, I'm just going to pray for this person and they're going to be healed and like everything's going to be good and this person's going to go back to being completely set free, I'm not saying that healing doesn't come in that way, but the process of not getting back to the negative behaviors only comes from replacing bad behaviors with positive behaviors. It doesn't just go away because stress doesn't just go away. Fears don't just go away. Anxiety doesn't go away. You have to train the mind and train the body to be able to respond to those triggers in a positive way. And the only way that we can help someone to be truly successful in that is to listen to what they enjoy to do and to implement those behaviors, so much so that it creates a connection in the mind to be able to go there when they need to have that reassurance, when they need to have that calming state of mind. And so how do we start the planning process of, okay, I've gotten this person this far. We have an idea of who they trust. We have an idea of maybe where this stemmed from. How do we begin to implement these people and implement a plan into place? So the first thing we want to do is we involve Aunt Sally, right? We're going to go involve that person that person trusts. And what we don't want to do is call and freak them out. And we don't want to put so much of a load of responsibility on Aunt Sally that they're like, I really think I need to tell mom and dad. Like, I can't do this. What we want to open up the door for is, all we're asking you to be is access for this person. We're not asking you to fix them. We're not asking you to heal them. We're not asking you to be qualified to take on the responsibility of replacing behaviors. All we want you to do is to open up access for this person to be able to talk to you. Then we can help you to guide through the steps as to what needs to happen next. All we want you to do is to commit to be access for this person. And so implementing an accountability plan is really important. So let's just say hypothetically, this person is struggling with an eating disorder. We want to have a gauge of where we are and where we want to be. And so it's really important for us to have either a doctor, or maybe it's Aunt Sally that says, hey, we're going to weigh you and we're going to take a food diary and we're going to look at it every week and we're going to see, is it going up? Is it staying the same? Is it decreasing? Like, these are things that we need to watch to make sure that there's some accountability there. Maybe if it is a pill situation, have we involved mom and dad, or is there a friend who can be like, hey, I love you and I do trust you, because we want them to feel like we trust them. I love you and I do trust you, but I got to look in your purse today. And so they're going to open their purse to that person and let them look and see, I don't have any pills today. I'm doing okay. Okay. Like, I'm just doing it because I love you. And that's the assurance, is like, I'm doing this not because I don't trust you, because I hate you. I'm doing it because I love you. And I do want you to be successful in turning this new leaf. And so I'm going to help you by being accountable to that. If they need structured counseling, if something has occurred specifically because of an abusive situation, or maybe parent separation, or just some other things that are cognitively associated to the behavior, then we want to be able to help them to get the strategic process in place by a licensed professional who can help them to process through some of the experiences that they're going through. Again, not putting all the pressure on Sally or yourself, but to have someone else that can have that. Let's just say they don't have insurance, or they don't have the accessibility into counseling. That's when we really start to look at how are there ways that we can help her or him be accountable and also feel included, and just having that consistency of making sure that they're coming to whatever it is. Let's just say they're in your youth group, or maybe it's an adult and they've been coming to a life group, like just kind of watching and monitoring that they don't kind of slide into the background. Again, that kind of goes with that community involvement. And that really does help in the success rate, is feeling like people aren't judging you, and feeling like when people look at you, that's all they see now, and allowing them to get to the point where it's part of their story. It's part of their testimony. It's not a place of shame and disclusion. It's a place of, part of their sanctification story is they just weren't ready to deal with some tough things in their life, but they've come to a place where they can be successful now. Okay, so let's talk about the goal. The goal of crisis communication is to keep the language in a loving manner that calls for change. We can't call for change if we talk at people. If I'm just here to lecture you, if I'm just here to be like, well, the Bible says, or, like, this is wrong, or things like that, you will be surprised how much people actually know. And so talking at them, they're like, I know this. It doesn't mean I can stop. To them, it truly is part of an addiction. It is part of the process of like, I don't know how to stop. I'm in it. I feel like this is the only release that I have. Maybe it's about control. A lot of times with eating disorders and self-harm, it really is about control. Something in their life feels out of control. This is one thing that they can control. This is one thing that they can do. But there does come a point where they start to feel like it went from me feeling like I could control it, and now it's controlling me. So we want to be loving in that process and not have really high expectations that people just can't meet. It is a time commitment. And so we want to start with simple steps and give them simple things for them to be able to accomplish, and then progressively move them forward. Don't set the bar this high. Don't go, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to never cut again, or like, I want you to go and throw all your pills away. It's like, when you jump that far, they can't sustain it long term. So keep it in love, be patient, understand it is a process. We don't want to encourage the behavior for attention, and also do not want to judge or condemn someone in which they are processing pain. So remember, this person is processing something that they can't control, whether that's an emotional experience, or maybe it is a physical experience. Maybe mom and dad are in the middle of a divorce, or maybe they themselves are in the middle of a bad situation, a bad relationship as an adult. They don't know how to control it. Then we really want to focus on that thing that they can't control, and help them to understand that there is a component of our relationship with God that gives us the freedom to know that we don't have to control everything. If it's something they can control, like getting out of a bad relationship, again, connecting them with people and resources that can help them to leave that situation that is abusive, or to begin a counseling process to deal with whatever the relationship situation is. That's the goal, is to go into the process of dealing with the thing that is causing the emotions that lead to the self-harm. Our goal is not to fix the self-harm, because you can't. You cannot fix the problem. You have to fix the problem that is causing the problem. Does that make sense? I hope so. So, one of the things that we do know with confidence is that prayer does work in these particular situations. If you're thinking like, what is the one thing that I know that I can do? And I know it's going to feel cliche, but I'm going to show you some biblical references that actually confirm what I'm saying and confirm the notion of what I believe to be truth. And I know that praying over the person, praying with the family, praying through their situation, teaching them how to intentionally pray, being that diligence of maybe calling daily for the first little while to pray with them every day. Maybe it's on their lunch break or whatever it may be that is convenient for the both of you. But prayer is very effective. We want to keep that open door policy of understanding that we're in this for the long haul. We are not going to get tired of you. We're not going to give up on you, but we have to track success. We can't keep someone in the same space. And what we can, like, how do you know if someone's growing? How do you know if they're getting better? You know, because you see little successful changes in the person. If they're coming to you and they're just constantly complaining about the same thing, but they're not implementing any change, if they're not successfully moving forward in their trajectory, you know that you're really just kind of spinning your wheels, and this person is maybe even getting a little bit of a buzz off the attention. And so we really want to track that. And when we feel like the person is just comfortable getting into this addiction to empathy, and this is another segment that I do, it becomes an addiction to empathy, then what we want to do is we want to implement a new person. This new person is really there to push them forward and see if, like, I don't really feel like I'm being successful with you. I want you to be successful. And so I really think it's important to and it's not a cold turkey pull of the switch. You want to bring in this new person in the first meeting or two. The both of you sit down with this person and listen and help that person to kind of come up to speed as well. Don't make the individual who's going through the crisis have to repeat themselves, like have to start at square one. Make sure the new person comes in with your notes if you're keeping a diary, which I highly recommend, because it's a good way for us to kind of go back and see, is this person progressing or not? Where were we 2 weeks ago? Where were we a month ago? Especially if you're discipling multiple people. But if you are dealing with this person and it's time to implement a new person, give them a copy of your notes. Walk them through some of the scenarios you've already done. And maybe they have a different approach or a different tone, a different connection. Maybe there's a cognitive block. Maybe they don't do well with women and they do better with men, or maybe they don't do well with men and they'll do better with women. Maybe it's the tone of your voice. Maybe there's just some kind of connection that is just essentially not meshing with their cognitive attachment to what you're asking them to do. And so once you kind of go through that gamut, you allow that person to then start to take notes and see if they have any progression or success on their end as well. I'm going to kind of share with you some of the key scriptures that I have found to be in association to self-harm, specifically in Mark 5:2-5. We have the image of the possessed man who is said to have been in a state of cutting himself with rocks or other sharp items. That would have been a form of the abuse he was putting himself through. They said he couldn't, be held by chains, that he was just completely consumed by the demonic nature. What I don't want you to do is take away from this verse and go, oh, okay, this person's demon possessed. What I want you to be able to know is that Satan has an influence on what we do to our bodies. And the demonic influence that comes through our minds influences what we do to our bodies, which is why a lot of people, when dealing with life crises, find things that alter their state of body. So state of mind, physicality, those kinds of natures. That includes alcoholism, that includes drug addiction, that includes many other formulas that involve us altering our body. It can even be gluttony, it could be through food, it could be through many other kinds of things. But if you notice, there is always a correlation to the body. So Leviticus 19:28, do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourself. I am the Lord. I think this is really specific to the idolization of these pagan rituals. I want to be really clear that I don't believe that tattoo marks is in association to all tattooing. I really think that it is about putting the symbols of Satanism or other secularisms on the body, which is a symbolic connection to the demonic side of things. You can disagree with me on that. I'm okay with it. That's really not the point of this conversation. But it is a scripture reference, and they say, well, where does it talk about it biblically? Here's another reference. In 1 Kings 18:24-29, it talks specifically about the worship unto Baal, who is a god with very limited effect at all, but is a huge influence, not just in its time, but in today's time, including also, I believe that a part of self-harm is abortion, because again, it has to deal with the body. And if you notice that in a lot of the conversations about abortion specifically, you hear a lot of women say, it's my body, it's my choice, it's my body. It isn't in association to the womb. It isn't in association to the child. It's specific to the body. And so this is then kind of goes to how they are trying to call amongst their God, and the prophets are calling amongst our God. And they get so discouraged because Baal is not responding to them that they start to cut and slash their body, which it says is part of their pagan ritual. So we do know that, again, this is an association to the demonic influence that is to destroy and destruct the body. And the body is more than just the physical sense. It is also the mental state of mind. So again, it's about influence. What kind of things are they influenced by, that they are encouraged by? Who are some of the influences in their life? And how can we change the influence and the noise that they are hearing, especially in a state of anxiety or in a state in which they do self-harm? And maybe it's really specific to the person what the cognitive connection is, but how can we replace that influence as to, instead of harming the body, what can we do in that time? Can we turn on worship music? Can we start to journal? Can we start to read our Bible? Can we exchange a behavior for a positive behavior? Don't make it so cliche that they're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. Sometimes it has to start with something they're willing to do. Like, have you thought about, they really like to draw. So, okay, let's do drawing. Let's implement that into our structure. And then we can go, okay, while we're drawing, let's turn on some worship music. While we're drawing, can we, say a prayer and just be praying through that process? One of the things that I do when I'm not trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, if God's calling me to something new, and I'm I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this, and it makes me anxious, is I always repaint one of the rooms in my house. My husband absolutely is just so confused by it. But in my painting, I'm forced to be really, really focused. And so as I'm sitting there painting a room or whatever, I'm praying. I'm being really focused on God. I'm really being focused in my thoughts. And it's the only way I can't be distracted, because I'm not watching TV. I'm not on my phone. I'm not listening to any other influence. I'm just really being intentional. And God's always good to speak to me during that time. And so that's something that I do. But to someone else, they'll be like, oh, that's torture. I'd hate that. I don't want to do that. So that's okay. They have something that is a positive influence to them. And so we want to discover what that is and then encourage that in a slow and progressive manner, especially if there's any sense of paganism or atheistic viewpoints. You don't want to immediately start with put on worship music and say a prayer. They're like, no, I'm not going to do that. So we want to bring them into the safety of wanting to include those things. And it is a commitment to time. I will not say that enough times. It is really, truly a commitment to time. So I really hope that this was helpful to you. If you have other topics or details, maybe this is an experience that you've gone through and maybe you've been healed from, and you're like, I have some really key things that you could add to this presentation. I'd love to hear that. You can email me any content reviews to madetowalk@clvplanners.com, and you can visit our website, madetowalk.org. And if I really hope that this is successful. I love to hear success stories as well. If you have someone that is looking for community to be able to talk through, maybe they're in the process of this healing process and they just need more assurance, they can always join and jump into one of our communities on the app. And one more thing that I want to add to that is that the app is a huge resource for you to hit into some other key components of some crisis topics that maybe you haven't addressed as well. If there's a community that we haven't built, I want to know about it because I'd love to do more research on it and be able to do a presentation on that. So thanks for your commitment to watching this, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.